Growing during cold weather is always a challenge, and this December has been colder than most. So much so that people are talking about a possible return of the polar vortex that gave us record low temperatures a few years ago. Fortunately, despite the cold, our crops are still hanging in there. Today I'll give you a brief overview of my approach to growing during cold weather here in Zone 5. And I'll show you what we've been harvesting this week after days of temperatures below 0 degrees Fahrenheit or negative 18 Celsius. Our basic approach is to grow cold-hardy crops in unheated structures under 2 layers of protection. Because we're relying entirely on the sun for heat, and plants need as much sun as possible, all of the structures are located in the sunniest areas of the garden. In the hoop house, the 2 layers of protection are provided by the hoop house itself and the cold frames and low tunnels inside. Outside the hoop house, we have 2 double-layered low tunnels. Each layer of protection significantly increases the temperature of the garden microclimate underneath. Even on very cold days, it's nice and warm under cover when it's sunny. All of these structures were built over shallow raised beds. The bed here in the hoop house is so shallow that we're essentially growing in the ground. This video of the hoop house raised bed build gives you a better picture of what the bed itself looks like. A larger mass means that the soil is much less likely to freeze. While the soil in containers would freeze and thaw over and over again, which is bad for plants, the soil in this bed typically doesn't freeze all winter under 2 layers of protection. In addition, the large soil mass stores heat during the day, which helps keep plants warmer at night. Despite the warmer temperatures in the garden microclimate, it still gets quite cold at night and on cloudy days like today. So we only grow cold-hardy crops. Some of our favorite winter crops include carrots, spinach, lettuce, kale, mustards, chard, and red vein sorrel. If you'd like to learn more about what we're growing this winter, please see the complete list in the description below. As a rule, other than harvesting, there's very little work to do in the garden from mid-December through mid-February. The plants are essentially dormant and don't need watering, and on most days we don't need to vent or add additional protection. However, we do vent the structures inside the hoop house on sunny days that are just below freezing or warmer. So far we haven't had to vent our 2 double-layered low tunnels at all because it's been quite cold and they don't get nearly as much sun as the hoop house does. I also add a 3rd layer of protection when temperatures are expected to dip below 5 degrees Fahrenheit or negative 15 Celsius for more than a day. On Wednesday, with a low of 0 degrees Fahrenheit or negative 18 Celsius in the forecast, I covered all our crops in the hoop house and low tunnels with Agribon AG19 floating row cover. This fabric is very lightweight but provides 4 degrees of protection. Because we're expecting a number of very cold days, I'll keep the cover in place until next week, when lows will be well above 5 degrees Fahrenheit. The fabric sticks to plants when they're frozen, so I won't remove it until plants thaw. And one additional measure I've started this year is to insulate the north wall of the hoop house with bags of leaves covered with snow. With no sun from the north, plants along the north wall are more vulnerable to the cold. If I had a higher budget when I built the hoop house, I probably would have built a well-insulated wood-framed north wall. Absent that, bags of leaves covered with snow should offer quite a bit of insulation for the plants on the north side of the hoop house. To give you a better idea of how effective these strategies are, let's take a look at what we harvested this week, along with the high and low temperatures on the days of the harvest. On Monday, I harvested kale, tree-collared, Swiss chard, perpetual spinach, lettuce, mustards, red vein sorrel, and French sorrel. This was before the Arctic air set in, and the high was a balmy 33 degrees Fahrenheit, and the low was 16. Wednesday was our first harvest after the Arctic air arrived. On Tuesday, the low was 4 degrees Fahrenheit, and on Wednesday we had a high of 20 and a low of 3. Harvesting greens when they're frozen can damage or kill them, but fortunately it was sunny enough to create a warm microclimate in the hoop house. I harvested kale, Swiss chard, perpetual spinach, tree collards, mustards, and lettuce. It was cold and overcast on Thursday and Friday, and with little sun hitting the hoop house, it didn't get warm enough in here to thaw out our crops so they could be harvested. But it's a little bit warmer today on Saturday, so I'm hoping we can do at least some harvesting. Let's find out. To harvest from a low tunnel, I first remove the spring clamps that secure the plastic to the hoops. I then remove rebar that creates a seal between the plastic and the top of the raised bed, and then open the plastic. Though many of the plants look stressed, This is temporary, and they'll rebound after warmer temperatures return. I start by harvesting kale, then red bean sorrel and dandelion greens, mustard greens, tree collards, lettuce, more mustards, more lettuce, and Egyptian walking onion greens. I ended up only opening one of the low tunnels today to harvest. As cold as it is, I decided to keep everything else shut to hold in as much warmth as possible for the cold night ahead. Tomorrow night we're looking at lows from -7 to -11 Fahrenheit, which will be the coldest it's ever been since I've had this setup. I'll be back next week to show you how the crops held up to the cold. I hope this video gave you a better idea of how we grow during the cold weather here in Zone 5, and that perhaps it inspired you to look for ways to extend the growing season where you live. It's time to get back inside. It's freezing out here. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up. And if you haven't already, please subscribe for more videos on how to grow a lot of food on a little land without spending much or working harder than you have to. The plants are essentially dormant and don't need water. And what's my next point? And, don't remember. Oh.